My name is Ava, and at 1:48 in the morning, my parents sent me a text saying my grandmother was dying and I needed to send $10 million immediately. But something about that message felt terribly wrong. The coldness, the impossible amount, the midnight timing. When I discovered the truth, it exposed a dangerous web of lies and criminals that had been lurking in my family for decades. If this story resonates with you, drop a comment below about where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about family secrets that destroy everything. The buzz of my phone jolted me awake at 1:48 in the morning. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart already racing before I even saw the screen. Mom's name glowed there, and beneath it, a message that made my blood run cold. Transfer the money now, your grandma may not survive till morning. I blinked at the words, reading them again and again, trying to make sense of them through the fog of sleep. But something felt wrong. The message was cold, transactional, like a demand rather than a plea. Where was the panic? Where was the grief? This didn't sound like a mother whose own mother was dying. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd typed it with detachment, like she was ordering groceries instead of begging for help in a life-or-death situation. Before I could even process that message, my phone buzzed again. Dad, this time. If you really loved this family, you wouldn't question us. My stomach twisted into that familiar childhood knot, the one I'd spent years trying to untangle in therapy. That sentence wasn't about Grandma. It was about control, about guilt, about making me feel like the villain for daring to hesitate. It was the same manipulation I'd endured my entire life, wrapped up in a crisis I couldn't verify. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling as I stared at both messages. Something about this entire situation screamed wrong. The timing, the tone, the way they were tag-teaming me with guilt and urgency. And that amount, $10 million. Why would Grandma need that much money? She'd always gone to the public hospital, the same one she'd trusted for decades. Emergency surgery there wouldn't cost anywhere near that amount. My mind drifted back to my childhood, to all those moments when I'd been made to feel like the problem child simply for existing. My younger brother Ethan had always been the golden one, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. When he broke something, it was an accident. When I broke something, it was carelessness. When he needed money, they gave it freely. When I needed anything, I had to earn it, prove I deserved it, justify why I couldn't just handle it myself. Every sacrifice in our family had been expected from me. Every grace had been extended to him. And now, in the middle of the night, they were coming to me with their hands out, demanding an impossible amount of money and weaponizing my love for Grandma to get it. I looked at Dad's message again and felt something inside me shift. For 29 years, I'd bent myself into shapes to please them, to be the good daughter, to prove I was worthy of the love they gave Ethan so freely. But right now, in the darkness of my bedroom with these cold, manipulative messages glowing on my screen, I felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Defiance. My fingers moved across the screen, typing words I never thought I'd have the courage to send. Ask your favorite child. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then powered off my phone completely. The silence that followed felt both terrifying and liberating. I'd just done something I'd never done before. I'd said no to them. I'd pushed back. But as the adrenaline faded, anxiety rushed in to fill its place. I lay back down, but sleep was impossible. My mind raced with questions that wouldn't stop coming. If Grandma was truly dying, why hadn't the hospital called me directly? I was listed as one of her emergency contacts. Why were my parents handling this through text messages at midnight instead of calling me, instead of having a doctor speak to me? And why, out of everyone in the family, were they targeting me and not Ethan? A memory surfaced, one I'd pushed aside years ago as family drama I didn't want to get involved in. I'd been visiting for Sunday dinner, maybe 2 years back, and I'd overheard Mom and Dad arguing in the kitchen. Dad's voice had been sharp with frustration, something about Ethan and gambling and debt. Mom had shushed him quickly, and when I'd walked in, they'd both gone silent, smiling at me like nothing had happened. I dismissed it at the time. Ethan had always been a little reckless with money, a little too confident in schemes that never quite panned out. But Mom and Dad always covered for him, always made his problems disappear. I figured they'd handled whatever it was. Now that memory slammed into me with new weight. What if they hadn't handled it? What if Ethan's problems had grown into something they couldn't fix? What if this midnight emergency had nothing to do with Grandma and everything to do with my brother's mess? I grabbed my phone and powered it back on, ignoring the flood of new messages from my parents. Instead, I called the public hospital directly, the one where Grandma always went. A tired night nurse answered, and I explained that I needed information about my grandmother's condition. "I'm sorry," the nurse said, "but I can't share patient information without authorization from the registered family contact."
I'm her granddaughter, I insisted.
I'm listed as an emergency contact. According to our records, the primary contact for Mrs. Moore is Karen Moore. You'll need to speak with her for any updates. My mother. Of course. They'd made sure I couldn't verify anything without going through them. The secrecy felt deliberate, carefully constructed to keep me in the dark and dependent on their word alone. I ended the call and paced my apartment, my mind spinning. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was deeply wrong. This wasn't about Grandma's health. This was about something else, something my parents were hiding, something they were willing to lie about and manipulate me over. Part of me wanted to drive to the hospital right then, to see Grandma with my own eyes and confirm whether any of this was real. But something held me back, a whisper of intuition that told me to wait, to let this play out just a little longer before I showed my hand. I spent the rest of the night awake, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Mom and Dad, each one more desperate and angry than the last. But I didn't read them. I just waited, my anxiety building with each passing hour. Then, just as the sun broke over the horizon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. My hand hovered over it for a moment before I answered. "Is this Ava Moore?" A professional male voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Officer Davidson from the Metro Police Department. We need to speak with you about your grandmother. Can you come down to the station?" My heart stopped. This was it. The worst had happened. Grandma was gone, and somehow the police were involved. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys, threw on clothes, and rushed out the door. I drove to the police station in a blur, my mind preparing for the worst. Grandma was dead. Or maybe she was missing. Maybe something terrible had happened and my parents had been trying to handle it themselves before involving the authorities. Maybe I'd been wrong about everything. The station was quiet at this early hour, just a few officers moving through the halls with coffee cups and tired eyes. Officer Davidson met me in the lobby, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a serious expression. He led me to a small conference room and gestured for me to sit. "Miss Moore, I want to start by saying that your grandmother is fine." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "What? Your grandmother is safe and well. She wasn't admitted to any hospital last night." The room seemed to tilt. "I don't understand. My parents said she was dying. They said she needed emergency surgery. They said." "We're aware of what they said." Officer Davidson pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "That's actually why we need to talk to you. Are you aware of any large financial requests made in your name recently?" "Made in my name? What do you mean?" "Your parents contacted us early this morning. They reported you as refusing financial responsibility for a family emergency. They painted a picture of you as unwilling to help your dying grandmother." He paused, watching my reaction. But when we started asking questions, several things didn't add up. I felt like I was drowning. My grandmother really isn't sick?
"No, ma'am."
We contacted her retirement home. She's perfectly healthy. She was asleep in her room all night, completely unaware of any medical emergency. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They'd lied. They'd actually lied about Grandma dying to manipulate money out of me. I pressed my hands flat on the table, trying to steady myself. "There's more," Officer Davidson continued. "One of the staff members at the retirement home filed a report with us 3 days ago. Your brother, Ethan Moore, visited the facility last week. According to the staff member, he seemed agitated, nervous. He was asking questions about your grandmother's will, her savings accounts, her insurance policies. My blood ran cold. Ethan was asking about her finances?
Yes.
The staff member found his behavior concerning enough to document it. Combined with your parents' report this morning and the suspicious financial demand, we started looking into your family's recent activities. He leaned forward. Miss Moore, we're not investigating you. We're investigating what appears to be an attempt at financial exploitation, possibly involving elder relatives. I couldn't breathe. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so ugly, I wanted to look away. This wasn't about Grandma's health. This had never been about Grandma. This was about Ethan, about whatever mess he'd gotten himself into, about my parents trying to use me as their personal ATM to bail him out. And they'd been willing to lie about a dying grandmother to do it. Miss Moore? Officer Davidson's voice pulled me back. Are you all right? That memory, I whispered. 2 years ago, I overheard them arguing about Ethan's gambling debt. Gambling debt. The officer's expression sharpened. Do you know who he owed money to? No, I didn't think much of it at the time. My parents always covered for him. I thought they'd handled it. I looked up at the officer. How much trouble is he in? That's what we're trying to determine. But Miss Moore, I need to be direct with you. Based on the pattern we're seeing, your brother may be involved with dangerous people. And there's a very real possibility that you could become his next target for money. We'd advise you to distance yourself from your family for the time being. Distance myself. From my entire family. The family I'd spent my whole life trying to please, trying to be good enough for, trying to earn love from. And now a police officer was telling me I needed to stay away from them for my own safety. I left the station in a daze. The morning sun too bright, the world too loud. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at nothing, trying to process what I'd learned. My parents had lied about Grandma dying. Ethan was in some kind of serious trouble, possibly with dangerous people. And they'd all decided that I was the solution, the cash cow they could guilt and manipulate into solving their problems. My phone buzzed. I looked down, expecting another message from Mom or Dad. Instead, it was from Ethan. We need to talk.
Now.
Not how's Grandma? Not are you okay?
Just a demand.
Just him, stepping out of the shadows my parents had been casting, revealing himself as the real puppeteer behind this entire nightmare. The favorite child, the protected one, finally showing his face. My hands were shaking as I started my car. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. I texted Ethan back and agreed to meet him, but I chose the location carefully. A crowded cafe downtown, lots of witnesses, security cameras, people everywhere. If he was mixed up in something dangerous, I wasn't going to make myself an easy target. I arrived early and picked a table near the window where I could see him coming. My leg bounced nervously under the table as I waited, my mind racing through every childhood memory, trying to find the moment when my little brother had turned into someone I was afraid to be alone with. When Ethan walked through the door, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd always been fit, confident, the golden boy who moved through life like everything was easy. But the man who slid into the chair across from me looked hollowed out. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken and darting around the cafe like he expected someone to jump out at any moment. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around the coffee cup I'd ordered for him. Ava, he started, his voice dripping with false sympathy, I'm so glad you came. Look, about last night, Mom and Dad really overreacted. They were just scared about Grandma, and Grandma was never sick. I cut him off, keeping my voice low but firm. I know, Ethan. The police told me everything. His face flickered, just for a second, and I saw something dark pass behind his eyes before he rearranged his features back into that familiar, concerned expression. It was the same mask he'd worn our entire childhood, the one that always fooled our parents but never quite worked on me. The police? Jesus, Ava, why did you involve the police? This is a family matter. Is it? I leaned forward. Because it seems like this is about you owing money to people who don't wait. That's not a family matter, Ethan. That's a you matter. The mask cracked. His jaw tightened, and he looked away, his fingers drumming anxiously on the table. When he finally spoke again, the false sympathy was gone, replaced by raw desperation.
Okay, fine.
Yes, I owe money. I made some bad bets, got involved with the wrong people. But Ava, they're serious. These aren't the kind of guys you can just avoid or pay back slowly. They want their money, and they want it now. He reached across the table like he was going to grab my hand, but I pulled back. I need 10 million. Just this once. Just this last time, and I'll be clear. I'll never ask you for anything again. This last time? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ethan, you lied about Grandma dying. You had Mom and Dad message me in the middle of the night, trying to guilt me into sending money for a medical emergency that never existed. You exploited Grandma's name, her health, my love for her, all to cover your gambling debts. I didn't want to. His voice rose, and several people at nearby tables glanced over. He lowered it again, leaning in closer. You think I wanted to involve the family? But I'm out of options, Ava. These people don't care about my excuses. They want their money, and if I don't give it to them, things are going to get really bad.
Things are already bad, Ethan.
You're threatening your own sister for money. I'm not threatening you. But even as he said it, his expression shifted into something harder, something uglier. I'm asking for help. But you've always been like this, haven't you? Always acting like you're better than the rest of us. Always judging, always holding yourself above the family. You OWES, Ava. After everything Mom and Dad did for you, everything they sacrificed.
Sacrificed.
The word burst out of me before I could stop it. Everything they sacrificed was for you, Ethan. Every time you screwed up, they fixed it. Every time you needed money, they gave it. Every mistake you made was forgiven, forgotten, swept under the rug. And me? I had to be perfect. I had to earn every scrap of approval, every moment of attention. So don't you dare talk to me about owing this family anything. His face transformed, the mask fully gone now. This was the real Ethan, the one our parents never saw or refused to see. His eyes were cold, his mouth twisted into something between a sneer and a snarl. You want to know the truth, Ava?
Fine.
If you don't help me, if you don't transfer that money, things are going to get bad.
Not just for me.
These people know where you live. They know where you work. They know everything about you, because I had to tell them. I had to give them something when I couldn't give them money. The cafe seemed to fade away. My vision narrowed to just his face, his words echoing in my head. He'd given them information about me. He'd put a target on my back to buy himself time. You gave them my information? I didn't have a choice. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. Look, just help me out here, and they'll leave you alone. But if you don't, if you refuse to help your own brother, then I can't control what they might do. They might show up at your place. They might. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From rage. From betrayal so deep I could taste it. You're threatening me. Your own sister. You're actually threatening me. I'm warning you, he hissed, half standing himself. This is bigger than you think. These aren't people you can just ignore. I'd had my phone in my lap the entire conversation, recording every word. I'd started at the moment Ethan sat down, some instinct telling me I'd need proof of whatever he said. Now I slipped it into my pocket, the recording safely captured. Stay away from me, Ethan. Ava, wait. But I was already walking away, pushing through the cafe door and out into the bright morning air. My whole body was trembling as I hurried to my car, constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following me. As I drove home, fragments of childhood memories flashed through my mind. Ethan breaking my toys and Mom saying it was an accident. Ethan stealing money from my piggy bank and Dad saying I must have miscounted. Ethan lying about me to get me in trouble, and our parents believing him every single time. The pattern had always been there. The protection, the excuses, the blind favoritism that trained him to believe he could do anything and someone would always clean up his mess. But this wasn't a broken toy or stolen allowance. This was criminal. This was dangerous. And somehow, I'd become the solution they all expected to sacrifice myself for. I went straight back to the police station. Officer Davidson was still there, looking exhausted but alert. When I told him I had a recording of Ethan, his entire demeanor changed. He brought me back to that same conference room and listened to the entire conversation, his jaw tightening with every threatening word my brother spoke. "Miss Moore," he said when the recording ended, "your brother is in deep trouble.
We need to show you something."
He left and returned with a file folder, thick with documents and photographs. He spread them out on the table, and I felt my stomach drop as I looked at them. Photos of Ethan at various locations, meeting with men I didn't recognize. Bank statements showing transfers in and out of accounts. Printouts of online betting activity, thousands and thousands of dollars lost. "We've been building a case on an illegal gambling ring operating in the city," Officer Davidson explained. "Your brother's name came up several months ago. He's involved with loan sharks, Miss Moore. Dangerous people who don't stop at threats." "How much does he owe?" "Based on what we've traced, around $12 million. The $10 million they're demanding from you wouldn't even clear his debt." $12 million. The number was so absurd it didn't feel real. How did someone even accumulate that kind of debt? How long had Ethan been spiraling, and how had no one noticed? But I knew the answer. People had noticed. Our parents had noticed. They'd just done what they always did, protected him, covered for him, enabled him. And now it had snowballed into something none of them could control. "There's something else," Officer Davidson said, his tone careful. "We have reason to believe your parents may have been helping him hide some of these transactions. There are transfers from their accounts to some of the same people your brother's been paying. They might be more involved in this than you realize." My parents. My own parents, not just enabling Ethan's problems, but actively participating in them. And they'd try to drag me into it too, using grandma as bait, using guilt and family obligation to manipulate me into being their get-out-of-jail-free card. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For now, stay low profile. Don't engage with your family. Don't answer their calls. We're concerned that the people your brother owes might try to target you directly, now that they know you're not cooperating." He paused. "Do you have somewhere safe you can stay?" "My apartment. But I live alone. I'd recommend changing your locks, maybe installing a security camera if you don't have one. And keep your phone on you at all times. If anything feels wrong, call us immediately." I left the station feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be my family. But the evidence was right there in that file folder, in that recording, in the lies they'd told, and the threats they'd made. I stopped at a hardware store on the way home and bought new locks, a security camera, and a motion sensor light for my front door. I spent the afternoon installing everything, my hands steadier than I expected. Maybe it was the routine of it, the concrete action I could take when everything else felt out of my control. By evening, my apartment felt like a fortress. New locks on the door and windows, camera pointed at the entrance, lights that would turn on at any movement. I tried to eat dinner, but couldn't stomach more than a few bites. I kept checking my phone, jumping at every notification. I tried to sleep that night, but every sound made me freeze. The building settling, a car passing outside, footsteps in the hallway that turned out to be my neighbor. Around 1 a.m, I finally dozed off, exhausted and wired all at once. Then, at exactly 1:48 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Not a polite knock. Not a neighbor asking to borrow something. Heavy fists pounding against the wood, hard enough to rattle the frame. My heart slammed against my ribs as I sat up in bed, frozen, staring at my bedroom door like I could see through it to whoever was outside. The pounding came again. Harder. More insistent. I grabbed my phone, my finger hovering over the emergency call button, and crept toward the front door. The security cameras app showed my phone screen, but when I pulled up the feed, the hallway outside my apartment was empty. No one was there. But someone had knocked. I'd heard it. Felt it.
Then I saw it.
An envelope on my doormat, just visible at the bottom edge of the camera's view. I waited, breath held, for what felt like hours. No more knocking.
No footsteps.
Nothing. Finally, with trembling hands, I undid all my new locks and opened the door just wide enough to grab the envelope. I slammed it shut immediately and locked everything again. The envelope was unmarked, plain white paper, but heavy. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph of me, walking to my car yesterday afternoon, completely unaware that someone was watching, close enough to capture the license plate, the details of my clothes, the coffee cup in my hand. Beneath the photo was a note, printed in stark black letters. Pay his debt or pay the price. I called the police with shaking hands, barely able to speak. Officer Davidson arrived with 2 other officers within 15 minutes. They examined the envelope, the note, the photograph. They checked the hallway cameras, but whoever delivered it had known exactly where the blind spots were. "This is escalating," Officer Davidson said, his face grave. "These people are making it clear they know where you are and that they're not afraid to get close." "What do I do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "We're going to increase patrols in your area. And we're going to bring your brother in for questioning."
He paused.
"Miss Moore, there's something else. We've been trying to locate Ethan since this afternoon to bring him in. We went to his apartment, his usual spots, even your parents' house." My heart sank. "And
He's not at any of them.
his car is missing. His apartment looks like he left in a hurry. We can't find him." The words hit me like ice water. What does that mean? It means either he ran or someone took him. And based on this threat, he gestured to the envelope, I'd say the people he owes found out he doesn't have their money. I sank onto my couch, the photograph still in my hands, staring at my own face caught unaware. Ethan was missing. The people he owed were watching me. My parents were involved in criminal activity. And somewhere in this nightmare, my grandmother was still blissfully unaware that her entire family was crumbling around a web of lies and debts. The worst part? I realized with cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Whatever was coming next would be worse. And I was standing right in the crosshairs, whether I wanted to be or not. Officer Davidson's phone rang. He answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. When he hung up, he looked at me with something close to pity. "That was one of our investigators. We just found something you need to know about." He hesitated. "Your brother's debts, the people he owes, they're not just random loan sharks. The name that keeps coming up in our investigation is Victor Langley." The name meant nothing to me, but from the way Officer Davidson said it, I knew it should. "Who is that?" "He runs a financial extortion ring. He's been on our radar for years, but he's careful, insulated. If your brother owes money to Langley's organization, this is more serious than we thought. And if Langley's people are targeting you, Miss Moore, then you're not just dealing with debt collectors. You're dealing with organized criminals who have resources, connections, and absolutely no hesitation about hurting people to get what they want." I stared at him, the photograph still clutched in my hands, and realized that my entire world had just shifted into something dark and dangerous. This wasn't about family drama anymore. This was about survival. And I had no idea if I was strong enough to make it through whatever was coming next. The police worked through the night processing the threat envelope, dusting for fingerprints, analyzing the paper, trying to trace where it had come from. I sat in my apartment with an officer stationed outside my door, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except that photograph of me walking to my car, completely unaware that I was being watched. Around 6 a.m, Officer Davidson returned with new information, and the grim expression on his face told me I wasn't going to like what he had to say. The envelope was clean. No prints, no DNA, nothing we can trace. Whoever delivered it knew what they were doing. He sat down across from me, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "But this isn't standard loan shark behavior, Miss Moore. The surveillance, the timing, the specific targeting. This looks planned, coordinated. These people didn't just randomly decide to threaten you. Someone gave them detailed information about your routine, your vulnerabilities." "Ethan," I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper with every revelation. "Most likely, but there's something else." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a man in his late 50s, distinguished looking, the kind of person you'd expect to see running a corporation, not a criminal enterprise. "This is Victor Langley. And the more we dig into your family situation, the more his name keeps appearing. Not just in connection with your brother's debts." Before I could ask what he meant, my phone rang. The screen showed Grandma's number and my heart lurched. I answered immediately. "Grandma? Are you okay?" Her voice came through shaky and uncertain. "Ava, sweetheart, I'm fine, but something strange happened. I need to talk to you about your brother." "What about Ethan?" "He came to see me last week, and he wasn't himself. He was frantic, pacing around my room at the retirement home, asking me all sorts of questions." She paused, and I could hear her taking a breath. "He wanted to know if I had any old documents from the past, specifically documents related to your father's business from years ago." I didn't understand why, but he seemed desperate. My hands tightened around the phone. "What documents?" "Your father had a consulting company about 18 years ago. It shut down after some kind of trouble, tax issues, or something like that. Robert asked me to keep some of his old business records, said he might need them someday. I put them in a locked drawer in my room and honestly forgot about them until Ethan started asking." Officer Davidson was leaning forward now, intensely focused on my side of the conversation. "Did you give them to him?" I asked.
No, dir.
Something about the way he was acting made me uncomfortable. He wasn't asking, he was demanding, and that's not like Ethan. So I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. She hesitated. "But Ava, I think you should come get those documents. I have a feeling they're important, and I don't want them here anymore. Something about all this feels wrong." I promised her I'd come right away, and ended the call. Officer Davidson was already on his feet. "I'm coming with you," he said. "If those documents are what I think they are, they could be the key to understanding this entire situation." We drove to Grandma's retirement home with a second officer following behind us. The morning was bright and clear, completely at odds with the dark web of secrets we were unraveling. Grandma met us at the door to her room, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered, worry etched into every line of her face. She hugged me tight, then pulled back to look at me. "What's happening, Ava? Why are the police here?" "It's complicated, Grandma. But those documents, we need to see them." She retrieved a worn folder from her locked drawer, the kind of thing that had been sitting untouched for years, accumulating dust and forgotten history. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, business contracts, and correspondence. But as I flipped through them, one name appeared over and over again, and my blood ran cold. Victor Langley. Officer Davidson took the folder, his expression darkening as he scanned the documents. "Your father was in business with Langley. These records show regular transfers, meetings, shared accounts. This wasn't just a consulting company, Miss Moore. Based on these documents, your father was involved in Langley's financial operations 18 years ago." "What kind of operations?" But I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "Money laundering, fraud, possibly extortion. The company shut down because they were being investigated. It looks like your father got out before charges were filed, but these records prove he was deeply involved." He looked at me with sympathy. "This isn't just about your brother owing Langley money. This is about old debts, old connections. Langley doesn't forget, and he doesn't let people walk away clean." The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly I wanted to close my eyes against it. Ethan didn't just have gambling debts. He'd gotten involved with the same criminal Langley our father had worked with decades ago, and now those old sins were coming back to haunt our entire family. And Ethan had been looking for these documents, probably trying to use them as leverage or destroy evidence or something equally desperate. "There's more," Grandma said quietly, reaching into the folder and pulling out a sealed envelope I'd missed. This was tucked in the back. "It's labeled for emergencies, in Robert's handwriting." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper with a list of names, dates, and dollar amounts. At the top, in my father's neat handwriting, were the words, "Insurance policy." Officer Davidson took the USB drive carefully, like it might explode. "We need to get this to our tech team immediately. If this contains what I think it does, your father kept records of Langley's illegal activities. Evidence that could bring down his entire operation. Why would he keep this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Insurance, like he wrote. If Langley ever came after him, he'd have leverage." But if Langley knows this exists, and if Ethan told him about it, then this is what they're really after. Not the money. The evidence. A car door slammed outside. We all turned toward the window, and my heart stopped. My parents' car had just pulled into the parking lot. Mom and Dad were getting out, both looking pale and frantic, moving toward the building with purpose. They knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a punch. They knew I'd come here. They've been tracking me, or they guessed, or Ethan told them. Officer Davidson moved quickly. We need to leave now, Miss Moore. Take the documents and the USB drive. I don't want them getting their hands on this evidence. But we were too late. My parents burst through Grandma's door, and the look on their faces was pure desperation. Mom's eyes were red from crying, but there was something harder underneath, something almost predatory. Dad looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him, gray and haggard. Ava, Mom said, her voice sharp. Why did you take that folder? Because Grandma wanted me to have it, I said, standing my ground even as my legs trembled. Because Ethan was trying to get it, and I needed to know why. You have no idea what you're messing with, Dad said, his voice low and dangerous. You need to give those documents back right now. She's not giving you anything. Officer Davidson stepped between us. Mr. and Mrs. Moore, we need to have a conversation about your involvement in. Dad's phone rang, cutting through the tension. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his face went completely white. He answered it, stepping toward the corner of the room, but I could still hear his side of the conversation.
Yes.
Yes, I understand. Please, you have to believe me, we're working on it. Just don't hurt him. Please. When he turned back to us, he looked like a broken man. They have Ethan. Langley's people picked him up last night. They want Ava to deliver the money personally, and they want those documents. If we don't comply, they're going to kill him. Mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing. But Grandma stood tall, her voice steady. Robert, what have you done? What have you gotten this family into? Dad couldn't meet her eyes. He looked at me instead, and what I saw there wasn't love or concern. It was expectation. They'd come here to pressure me into being the ransom, to convince me that saving Ethan was worth sacrificing everything, including evidence that could put dangerous criminals away. You want me to pay them, I said slowly, understanding crystallizing. You want me to give them the money and destroy the evidence of Dad's crimes, all to save Ethan. He's your brother, Mom said, her voice breaking. He's family. You can't just abandon him. I looked at her, at this woman who'd given birth to me but had never truly seen me, who'd spent my entire life making me feel like I was less than, like I existed only to serve the favorite child. And I realized something profound. I'd spent 29 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a resource, a backup plan, someone to exploit when their golden child inevitably failed. I'm not abandoning him, I said quietly. You abandoned me a long time ago. Every time you chose him over me, every time you expected me to sacrifice while he took, every time you made me feel like I had to earn what you gave him without question. You abandoned me, and now you're asking me to save the person you actually love. How can you be so selfish? Mom stood up, her face twisted with anger and desperation. Your brother could die, and you're talking about childhood grievances? These aren't grievances, Mom. This is a pattern. A lifetime of being treated like the backup child, the expendable one. I felt Officer Davidson's steadying presence beside me. And now you want me to pay criminals, destroy evidence of crimes, and put myself in danger, all because Ethan made bad choices and you enabled him until those choices became deadly. Dad moved toward me, hands outstretched. Ava, please. I know we haven't been perfect parents, but he's still your brother. We can make this right. We can be a real family after this, but first we need to save him. If you really loved this family, I said, throwing his own words from that midnight text back at him, you wouldn't have gotten involved with criminals in the first place. You wouldn't have protected Ethan until he thought he was invincible. You wouldn't be asking me to sacrifice myself now. Officer Davidson's radio crackled. Another officer's voice came through. We've got movement at the Moore residence. Possible surveillance team. Everything was happening so fast. Langley's people watching my apartment, my parents' house, probably tracking all of us. Ethan missing, possibly being held or hurt. Documents and evidence that could bring down a criminal empire. And me, standing at the center of it all, being pulled in every direction by people who all wanted something from me. Miss Moore, Officer Davidson said gently, we need to make a decision. These people are escalating. Your brother's life may genuinely be in danger. But if you give them what they want, Langley walks away clean and continues operating. More people get hurt. More families get destroyed. I looked at the USB drive in my hand, this tiny piece of plastic that somehow held the power to end all of this or make it so much worse. Then I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw strangers. People who'd created me but never truly known me, who'd shaped my childhood but never cared to understand who I actually was. I'll meet with them, I said finally. But I'm not giving them what they want. I'm going to end this. The police wanted to run a controlled operation, marked bills, undercover units, the whole elaborate setup. But I knew Victor Langley didn't get to where he was by being careless. He'd see through any obvious trap, and if he did, Ethan would pay the price. As much as my brother had betrayed me, as much as he'd put me in danger, I couldn't stomach the thought of him dying because of our parents' sins and his own stupid choices. Officer Davidson laid out their plan in a conference room at the station, maps and photographs spread across the table. But the whole time he talked, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He knew as well as I did that Langley was too smart for conventional tactics. My parents sat in chairs against the wall, looking smaller and more pathetic with each passing hour. Dad kept trying to interject, to take control of the situation like he always had, but no one was listening to him anymore. His power in this family had been an illusion built on secrets and lies, and now those secrets were exposed. The lies were crumbling, and he had nothing left but desperation. Mom hadn't stopped crying, but it was an ugly crying, full of anger and accusation every time she looked at me. I'd become the villain in her mind, the ungrateful daughter who wouldn't sacrifice everything to save her precious son. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Officer Davidson nodded for me to answer, already signaling his team to try tracing the call. Miss Moore, a smooth, cultured voice said. It was the kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms and expensive restaurants, not making threats and holding people hostage. My name is Victor Langley. I believe you have something that belongs to me. You mean the evidence of your crimes? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed, a sound without humor.
Direct.
I appreciate that. Your father was never so straightforward. He spent years pretending to be something he wasn't, taking my money while judging the work we did. At least you're honest. What do you want? I think you know. The USB drive, the documents, and the $10 million your brother owes. In exchange, I return Ethan to you, unharmed, and we all walk away from this unfortunate situation. How do I know you actually have him? How do I know he's alive? There was a pause, some muffled sounds, and then Ethan's voice came through, shaky and terrified. Ava, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't know about Dad's history with Langley. I thought I was just making bets, and then the debt grew, and he said he'd clear it if I helped him with something, and I'm so sorry, please, you have to help me. The line went back to Langley. Satisfied? He's alive and relatively comfortable, though I can't promise that will remain the case if you don't cooperate. You have 24 hours to gather the money and the evidence. I'll send you a location for the exchange. Come alone, Miss Moore. No police, no tricks. If I even suspect you're trying to trap me, your brother dies and you'll be next. He ended the call before I could respond. Officer Davidson's team shook their heads. They couldn't trace it, unsurprisingly. You can't actually be considering this, Officer Davidson said. This is a trap. He'll take the evidence, probably take the money, and there's no guarantee he'll let either of you walk away. I know, I said. But do we have a better option? The room fell silent. We all knew the truth. Langley held all the cards. He had Ethan, he had resources, he had experience dealing with law enforcement. Any aggressive move from the police could end with my brother dead and Langley disappearing into the network of protection he'd built over decades. Dad finally spoke up, his voice hoarse. "I'll go. This is my fault. Let me be the one to face him." "He doesn't want you, Dad," I said, not unkindly. "He wants me. He wants the person who has nothing to lose, who he thinks he can control with threats." I looked at Officer Davidson. But maybe that's exactly why I should go. He's expecting someone scared and compliant. What if I give him something else? Over the next 12 hours, we formed a plan. Not the obvious sting operation Langley would anticipate, but something more subtle. I would go to the meeting, but I wouldn't have the real USB drive. Officer Davidson's tech team was creating a decoy, one that would look identical, but contain garbage data. The real drive would be secured in police custody, ready to be used as evidence. As for the money, I didn't have $10 million and never would. Instead, we'd create a bag that looked full but contained mostly fake bills, enough real ones on top to pass a quick inspection. It wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but it might buy us time. "The goal isn't to fool him completely," Officer Davidson explained. "It's to get close enough for our undercover team to move in, to create a moment where we can extract you and your brother while securing Langley." It sounded reasonable in the clean, well-lit conference room surrounded by officers and strategy. But I knew once I stepped into that meeting, once I faced a man who'd spent decades evading consequences, all our careful plans might fall apart in an instant. My parents wanted to come, of course. They begged, pleaded, tried to guilt me one more time. But I refused. This was happening because of them, because of choices they'd made long before I was old enough to understand what family really meant. They created this nightmare, and they didn't get to play hero in its resolution. The day passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd act, trying to become someone confident and unbothered even as my hands shook and my stomach churned. Grandma called me in the afternoon, her voice strong despite everything. "Ava, sweetheart, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. You're the only one in this family who chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost you. That takes courage your father never had." I held on to those words as midnight approached, as Officer Davidson drove me to the location Langley had specified. An abandoned shipping yard on the outskirts of the city, all rusted containers and broken concrete, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one heard the screams. I had a wire hidden under my clothes, a panic button in my pocket, and a team of officers positioned around the perimeter. But as I stepped out of the car and watched Officer Davidson drive away, leaving me alone in that vast, dark space, all the preparation felt inadequate. I was walking into the den of a predator, armed with deception and desperate hope. 2 black SUVs pulled up, their headlights blinding me. Car doors opened, and men stepped out, faces hidden behind masks. They moved with military precision, surrounding me, checking me for weapons and wires. My heart stopped when rough hands found the wire, ripping it from under my clothes. "Did you really think we wouldn't check?" one of them said, his voice muffled behind the mask. He crushed the wire under his boot, then took my phone and the panic button. "Mr. Langley is very thorough." They zip-tied my hands in front of me and pushed me toward one of the SUVs. This wasn't the plan. They were taking me somewhere else, somewhere the police weren't positioned, somewhere I'd be completely at their mercy. I tried to catch a glimpse of the officers I knew were watching, tried to signal somehow that things had gone wrong, but the men shoved me into the vehicle and slammed the door before I could do anything. We drove for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. When we finally stopped, they pulled me out into an enormous warehouse, mostly empty except for a few chairs and bright lights positioned to create an interrogation-style setup. And there, sitting calmly in one of those chairs, was Victor Langley. He looked exactly like his photo, distinguished and controlled. Wearing an expensive suit like this was a business meeting instead of a hostage situation. He smiled as they brought me forward, a smile that never reached his cold eyes. "Miss Moore, finally we meet. I apologize for the dramatic precautions. but your father and I have history, and I've learned not to trust the police." "Where's my brother?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. Langley gestured, and two more men dragged Ethan out from a dark corner. He looked terrible, bruised and exhausted, but alive. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. I just wanted to fix everything, and I thought I could handle it, but it got so big, and I didn't know what to do." For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in my brother. Not the practiced manipulation, not the entitled expectation that someone would save him. Real understanding of the consequences his actions had caused. It came too late and changed too little, but it was there. "Your brother is quite the disappointment," Langley said conversationally. "He came to me thinking he could leverage your father's old connections, use them to clear his pathetic gambling debts. When I explained the debt was far larger than he imagined, inherited from your father's past betrayals, he panicked. Started making promises about evidence, about insurance his father kept." He leaned forward. "That's when things became interesting. Your father may have been weak, but he was smart enough to keep leverage. Now, where is it?" I held up the decoy bag, with shaking hands. "The money and the USB drive. Everything you asked for." Langley took the bag and opened it, rifling through the bills with experienced fingers. I watched his expression change from satisfaction to cold rage as he realized most of the money was fake. He tossed the bag aside and pulled out the USB drive, examining it. "Your father was many things, Miss Moore, but he would never keep something this important on a standard USB drive. This is a decoy." He stood up, and the temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop. "You're playing games with me. I don't appreciate games." Before I could respond, before I could explain or beg or do anything, another car pulled up outside. The warehouse door opened, and my heart sank as my father stumbled in, my mother right behind him. "Stop," Dad shouted. "I have what you want. The real USB, the real evidence. Just let them go, Victor. This is between you and me." Langley's smile returned, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Robert, always so dramatic. But you're right. This is between us. Your children, your wife, they're just collateral damage from choices you made 2 decades ago." He nodded to his men. "Bring him here." The guards grabbed Dad, forcing him forward. Mom screamed, running toward them, but another guard caught her easily. I looked around frantically, hoping the police had followed my parents, hoping someone was coming to end this nightmare. But we were alone with monsters, and I realized with sickening clarity that Langley never intended to let any of us walk away from this warehouse alive. Dad held up a USB drive, his hand trembling but his voice steady. "This is the real one, Victor. All your records from our partnership, the money laundering, the fraud, the people you've hurt over the years. Everything I promised to keep secret. I'm giving it to you now, just let my family go." Langley walked toward my father with measured steps, like a predator approaching wounded prey. "You think I didn't know you kept insurance? I've been waiting for you to show your hand for 18 years, Robert. Waiting to see if you'd ever be stupid enough to try using it against me." "I'm not using it against you," Dad said desperately. "I'm giving it to you. Take it, destroy it, and we'll disappear. You'll never hear from us again. You really don't understand, do you?" Langley laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "This isn't about the evidence. I have lawyers, judges, politicians in my pocket. Evidence alone can't touch me. This is about respect, about consequences. You took my money, you betrayed our partnership, and you thought you could walk away clean while I took all the risk." He gestured to all of us. "Your children are suffering because you were weak. Your wife is terrified because you were greedy. And now you're offering me what I could take from you anyway, as if it gives you leverage." One of Langley's men grabbed the USB drive from Dad's hand and brought it to Langley, who pocketed it without even looking. "Thank you, Robert. Now, let's discuss payment for all the trouble you've caused me." "I don't have the money," Dad whispered. "We've spent everything trying to cover Ethan's debts, trying to keep this quiet. There's nothing left." "Oh, I know. That's why your daughter was so valuable." Langley turned to me, his cold eyes assessing. "The responsible one, the one with savings and good credit and no criminal record. You were going to be my insurance policy, a way to guarantee payment over time. But you've been difficult, Miss Moore. You involved the police. You fought back. That complicates things. Ethan made a sound, something between a sob and a groan. Just kill me and let them go. This is my fault. I'm the one who got involved with you, who made promises I couldn't keep. They didn't do anything wrong. For the first time, Langley looked surprised.
Well,
perhaps the golden child has developed something resembling a conscience. Unfortunately, it's too late for noble sacrifices. I'd been scanning the warehouse while Langley talked, looking for any advantage, any way out. The guards were positioned strategically, blocking the exits. But they were focused on the adults, on my parents, and the threat they presented. They tied my hands loosely, assuming I was the least dangerous person in the room. They were wrong. I'd spent my entire life being underestimated, being treated as less important, less capable, less worthy of attention. For once, that was going to work in my favor. While Langley continued his monologue about Dad's betrayals and the price families pay for sins, I worked my hands free of the zip tie. The trick was subtle wrist movements, gradually loosening the plastic while keeping my hands positioned, as if they were still bound. It hurt, the plastic cutting into my skin, but I kept working it. Your father cost me more than money, Langley was saying. He cost me trust, reputation, time. When our partnership ended and he disappeared with my records, it sent a message to others in my organization. That Victor Langley could be betrayed. That people could take from me and walk away. I've spent years rebuilding that reputation, making examples of anyone who even considered crossing me. We were going to pay you, Mom said, her voice shaking but determined. That's why we asked Ava for the money. We were trying to make this right. By lying about a dying grandmother? Langley shook his head. By manipulating your own daughter? You people are almost as morally bankrupt as I am, except you hide it behind family values and self-righteousness. At least I'm honest about what I am. The zip tie finally gave way. My hands were free, but I kept them positioned together, watching for my moment. I caught Ethan's eye, and he saw what I'd done. His eyes widened, and I gave the tiniest shake of my head. Not yet. That's when we heard the sirens. Distant at first, but growing louder. Multiple vehicles, closing in fast. Langley's expression flickered with annoyance, and he pulled out his phone, barking orders to someone. His men moved toward the exits, weapons drawn, creating a defensive perimeter. Seems your daughter brought friends after all, Langley said to Dad, his voice deadly calm. That's disappointing. Now we'll have to accelerate our timeline. He pulled out a gun, pointing it casually at my father. Last words, Robert? Everything happened at once. The warehouse doors burst open, and officers poured in, shouting commands. Langley's men opened fire, and the space erupted into chaos. Mom screamed and dove for cover behind a shipping container. Dad dropped to the ground, hands over his head. And I moved. I grabbed Ethan, yanking him toward the nearest cover, a stack of wooden pallets that wouldn't stop bullets, but was better than standing in the open. He was weak from his captivity, stumbling, so I half-dragged him, adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I had. Bullets ricocheted off concrete and metal. Orders were shouted. Someone was screaming. I couldn't tell who. I pressed Ethan behind the pallets and covered him with my body, the way I'd done when we were kids and he'd had nightmares, protecting the little brother who'd betrayed me, but was still, somehow, my family. I didn't know. Ethan sobbed against my shoulder. I swear, Ava, I didn't know about Dad and Langley. I thought I was just borrowing money. When Langley told me the debt included Dad's old betrayal, I panicked. I thought if I could get the evidence, I could trade it for freedom. I never wanted you to get hurt. I never wanted any of this. I know, I said, and I realized I meant it. Ethan was weak and spoiled and made terrible choices, but he wasn't evil. He was just a product of the same broken family dynamics that had shaped us both, only he'd been given everything and learned to expect the world would always catch him when he fell. The gunfire was decreasing, more shouts, sounds of people being apprehended. I risked looking over the pallets and saw Langley making a run for a back exit with two of his men, leaving the others to face the police. Coward that he was abandoning everyone to save himself. He still had both USB drives, the real one and the decoy. All the evidence was slipping away. I didn't think. I just moved, sprinting from behind the pallets, ignoring Ethan's shout of protest. One of the officers saw me and yelled for me to get down, but I was faster. I'd spent my whole life being careful, being good, following rules, and trying to be perfect. Right now, I needed to be reckless. Langley heard my footsteps and turned, gun raising, but one of the officers shot first. The bullet hit the ground near Langley's feet, and he stumbled, falling against the exit door. I reached him just as his men grabbed him, trying to pull him outside to a waiting vehicle. I lunged for his pocket, the one where he'd put the USB drives, my fingers closing around them. One of the men backhanded me, and pain exploded across my face, but I didn't let go. I ripped the drives from Langley's pocket and fell backward, clutching them against my chest. Strong hands grabbed me, pulling me back into the warehouse. Officer Davidson's face appeared above me, checking if I was hurt, pulling me to safety behind the line of officers. I opened my hands, showing him the two USB drives, and he stared at them like I'd just handed him salvation. "Get her out of here," he shouted to another officer, and I was hustled toward the exit, legs shaking, face throbbing, but alive. I was alive, and I had the evidence. Behind me, I heard Langley screaming threats and promises, heard the officers subduing his men, heard the chaos of justice finally catching up to people who thought they were above consequences. I didn't look back. I just let them guide me outside into the cold night air, where ambulances waited and more police cars surrounded the warehouse, creating a net that not even Victor Langley could escape. Mom and Dad were brought out separately, both in handcuffs. They'd crossed too many lines, helped too many crimes, lied too many times. Officer Davidson had explained earlier that they'd face charges as accessories, and watching them be loaded into police cars, I felt nothing. No sadness, no satisfaction, just emptiness where family love should have been. Ethan was taken to an ambulance, and I followed, needing to see him despite everything. He looked up at me as the EMTs checked him over, tears streaming down his bruised face. "You saved me," he whispered. "After everything I did, you still saved me." "Yeah," I said simply. "That's what family does, even when they don't deserve it." The days following the warehouse incident blurred together in a haze of police interviews, evidence processing, and media attention. Langley's arrest made national news. The USB drives I'd recovered contained decades of criminal activity, enough to bring down not just Langley, but several of his associates, corrupt officials, and the entire network he'd built. I was called a hero by reporters who didn't understand I'd just been trying to survive. I wasn't brave or noble. I was just a woman who'd been pushed too far by people who should have loved her. Ethan spent 3 days in the hospital, recovering from his captivity. The doctors said he was dehydrated and malnourished, but would be fine physically. Mentally was another story. On the 4th day, a detective came to question him about his involvement with Langley's organization. I was there when Ethan gave his statement, watching my brother cry as he admitted to everything. The gambling, the escalating debts, approaching Langley thinking he could negotiate when really he'd walked into a trap built from our father's old sins. For the first time in his life, Ethan faced consequences without someone rushing to protect him. "I want to make things right," he told the detective, his voice hoarse. "I'll testify. I'll cooperate with any investigation. I'll plead guilty to whatever charges you bring. I just want to finally do something good, even if it's too late." The detective explained that Ethan would likely face charges for his involvement in illegal gambling and for helping Langley's organization, but his cooperation would be considered. He'd probably serve time, though how much depended on many factors. After the detective left, Ethan looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy he used to be, before he learned that the world would always give him what he wanted. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought about it.
No, I don't hate you, Ethan.
I'm sad for you. Sad that you were raised to think you could escape consequences, that Mom and Dad loved you so much they never taught you how to be strong. In a way, they failed you as much as they failed me, just differently. Will you visit me? If I go to prison? I don't know. Maybe. But I'm not going to be your safety net anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be real, not just you needing something. He nodded, accepting that, and I left him there with a guard outside his door, finally facing the reality he'd spent his whole life being sheltered from. My parents were being held pending charges for their involvement in Langley's activities and for obstruction of justice. Mom tried calling me repeatedly from jail, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to furious to manipulative. Dad wrote me a letter that arrived a week after the arrests. I almost didn't read it. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to cut that tie completely and never look back. But curiosity won, and I opened it late one night, sitting alone in my apartment that finally felt safe with its new locks and cameras. The letter was long, full of explanations and justifications, but one paragraph stood out. I know you think I never loved you, Ava, but that's not true. I did love you. I just loved protecting Ethan more. He reminded me of myself at that age, confident and reckless, and I thought if I could save him from his mistakes, I could somehow redeem my own. I sacrificed you to save him, and I know now that was unforgivable. You were always the stronger one, the better person. I'm sorry I never told you that when it mattered. It wasn't enough. An apology in a letter couldn't undo a lifetime of being second choice, of being the fallback plan, of being treated as less important than my brother. But it was something, a crack in the wall of denial my father had built around his choices. I threw the letter away anyway. Grandma was my refuge during those weeks. She'd given a full testimony to the police about keeping Dad's documents, about the business records she'd held onto for years without understanding what they really meant. She blamed herself for not speaking up sooner, but I told her she'd been protecting her son the same way any mother would. The difference was, when she learned the truth, she chose to do the right thing instead of enabling him further. You're the only one in this family who chose integrity over loyalty, I told her during one visit. That means everything. She held my hand, her skin thin and papery, but her grip strong. Your grandfather used to say that real love means telling people the truth even when it hurts. I should have told Robert the truth years ago, that he was heading down a dark path. Instead, I enabled him by keeping his secrets, just like he enabled Ethan. This family's sickness is silence, Ava. Promise me you won't carry that forward. I promised. The investigation into Langley's organization uncovered more than anyone expected. Backup records on his men's phones and computers revealed additional crimes, connections to other criminal enterprises, names of people who'd been paid off or threatened into silence. The real USB drive my father had kept became the foundation of a massive prosecution that would take years to fully unfold. 3 weeks after the warehouse incident, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew who it was from before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a printed message. Impressive work, Miss Moore. You've cost me considerably. Don't think this is over. The paper was singed along one edge, and tucked behind it was a burnt corner of a USB drive. The real one, destroyed before it could be processed as evidence, despite everything I'd done to recover it. Langley was in jail awaiting trial, but he still had reach, still had resources, still had people who owed him favors. This was his way of telling me that even behind bars, he could touch my life, remind me that consequences for men like him were never as final as they should be. I brought the letter to Officer Davidson, who studied it with a grim expression. The USB drive we have is still valid evidence, even if he destroyed another copy. This is just intimidation, Miss Moore. He wants you to feel afraid. It's working, I admitted. Then fight it by living well. That's the best revenge against people like Langley. He wants you broken and scared. You show him you're neither. I started therapy 2 days later. A professional who specialized in family trauma, who listened to my entire story without judgment, who helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable, and wasn't something I had to carry forward into the rest of my life. You've spent your entire existence trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely, my therapist said during our 3rd session. Now you have a choice. You can keep trying, keep hoping they'll change, or you can accept who they are and build a life that doesn't require their approval. I chose the second option. I didn't visit my parents in jail. I didn't answer their calls or respond to their letters. I told Ethan I needed space at least a year, maybe more, before I could consider having any kind of relationship with him.
And I meant it.
Instead, I focused on myself for the first time in 29 years. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while dealing with family drama. I took up hobbies I'd always wanted to try. I saved my money for my own dreams instead of keeping it as an emergency fund for other people's disasters. 6 months after the arrests, my parents were sentenced. Dad got 8 years for his involvement with Langley's organization and obstruction of justice. Mom got 4 years as an accessory and for her role in the financial exploitation attempt against Grandma. Ethan's sentencing came 2 months later, 3 years for his involvement in the illegal gambling ring, with credit for cooperation and time served. I didn't attend any of the sentencing hearings. I read about them in news reports, felt a distant sense of closure, and moved on with my day. 9 months after everything fell apart, I sat in the same cafe where Ethan had threatened me, the place where I'd secretly recorded his desperate demands. But this time, I wasn't meeting my brother. I was meeting a woman I'd connected with through a survivor support group, someone who understood what it felt like to be the scapegoat child in a dysfunctional family. We talked about healing, about the strange freedom that comes from cutting ties with people who hurt you, about building new definitions of family that didn't rely on blood relation or shared history. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made my heart stop. Victor Langley's location detected after prison break. He'd escaped. Somehow, despite all the security, despite being held in maximum security pending trial, Langley had gotten out. And the first place authorities were checking was my address, my workplace, anywhere I might be vulnerable. I stood on the sidewalk, reading the article with shaking hands, feeling all my carefully constructed peace threatened by the monster I'd thought was safely contained. Part of me wanted to panic, to run, to hide. But I didn't. Instead, I called Officer Davidson, who was already trying to reach me. I went to the police station and gave them updated information about my routines, my security setup, everything they needed to keep me protected. I accepted the protection detail they assigned, the check-ins, the temporary relocation they suggested. And through it all, I felt different than I had 9 months ago. Then, I'd been a woman drowning in other people's chaos, trying to survive a nightmare I didn't create. Now, I was a survivor who'd faced down criminals and family betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Langley's escape was terrifying, but it didn't define me. I'd already faced the worst he could throw at me and survived. If he came for me again, I'd face that too, but I wouldn't let fear steal the life I was building. That evening, I sat with Grandma in her retirement homeroom, telling her about the escape and the police's response. She held my hand and told me how proud she was of who I'd become. "Your nightmare isn't over," she said gently. "But neither is your strength. You've already proven you're a survivor, Ava. Whatever comes next, you're ready for it." I smiled, a quiet, determined smile that felt earned through fire and pain and choices that cost everything but gave me myself back. "Yeah," I said. "I am." Outside the window, the sun was setting over the city where my family had fallen apart, where secrets had exploded into violence, where I discovered exactly how little I meant to the people who should have loved me most. But it was also the city where I'd found my courage, where I'd stood up to monsters, human and criminal, where I'd finally chosen myself over the family that never chose me. My phone buzzed again. Another update on the manhunt for Langley, reports of possible sightings, warnings to stay vigilant. I read them all, acknowledged them, and put my phone away. This story wasn't over. Langley was out there somewhere, possibly watching, possibly planning. My family was scattered through various prisons, dealing with consequences they'd spent years avoiding. And I was here, building a new life from the ashes of the old one. But for the first time in my entire existence, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I'd survived everything they'd thrown at me, every manipulation, every betrayal, every threat. I'd exposed a criminal empire, protected evidence that would help dozens of victims get justice, and walked away from a family that treated me as expendable. Whatever Victor Langley had planned, whatever my family's next move would be, whatever chaos waited in the future, I'd face it the same way I faced everything else. As a survivor who refused to be broken. As a woman who knew her worth. As someone who finally chose herself first. And that made all the difference. When the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones you need protection from, how do you rebuild what family means? If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more true stories about resilience, betrayal, and finding strength when everything falls apart.